Hey guys, John here from CONTRABIM, and one of the new features in Archicad 24 that I thought was really quite interesting is this PARAM-O plugin that allows you to create objects using this node-based hierarchy system. So I thought I would do a quick introduction video on it. It's something that I'm not real familiar with, but starting to kind of teach myself as I'm going through this. There's not a whole lot of videos out there on it right now, but what I've done is just kind of taken actually an image of this table here, and I've started to kind of reverse engineer it to teach myself how to set this up. So hopefully this video can be useful to you in just kind of getting started. And so what I want to do is just kind of real quickly walk through the process of how to enable this plugin, and then we'll kind of dive in and take a look at the different parts of the editor, and then we'll jump into an example of a table and talk about kind of how to set up some of these structures here. So if you have not downloaded this file, then you can get it here from the graphisoft.com downloads param-o, and I guess it's only available on Windows right now, so go ahead and download it. It's a .apx file format, and once you have downloaded that, then the way that you would install it is essentially you would just drop this APX file. I've dropped it in under my Archicad 24 folder here on my C drive. I've dropped it under add-ons. In the extras is where most of the other APX files are loaded. So that's where I've dropped this file in here. You can see it's only about 4 megabytes. And then once you've opened up Archicad here, you would then go to the add-on manager, and you would add and make sure that you've gone through and added the latest version here. So I believe when they come out with new versions of this, you need to go in and delete the old one and add the new one. I haven't gone through that workflow just yet, but I thought I was reading that in some of the documentation. So, okay, let's close this down. And all right, so you can see here I have a little table that I've been working on, trying to learn this this workflow myself. But in order to access the PARAM-O editor, it's going to be loaded up here under libraries and objects. And then you'll see that there's 3 new options here. There's the manager, there's create a new object, which would just essentially, it kind of skips the step of going through the manager. Or if you have an object highlighted, you can go and open that selected object all at once. But let's start here in the PARAM-O manager. You can see I just have a few little table tests that I've been working on. In order to create a new object here, we'll dive into some of these here in a few minutes, but to create a new object, you would just click new, and then you'll see that this launches the new object editor. So this this editor is really broken up into a few different parts here. We have all the different nodes here on the left. So just our general parameters, which like the dimension 1, 2, and the height here, or A, B, and Z as is kind of known in the object settings. These really kind of go hand in hand with these settings down here. So the way that I understand this is it's kind of like the global sizing of the objects, and these numbers down here represent the default value that that the object is going to be set at. Quick note here, this is only available in meters. So you'll notice, as we start creating objects, is if it's set to 1 by 1 by 1, it's going to be a little over 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. And so you'll want to take that into account if you're working in imperial units, and you can always go in and adjust those later in the settings. So so how you start adding these to a file here is you can just kind of drag them directly in. So I've found that it's good to have really all 3 of these parameters kind of set, because we can take these and start driving them into a lot of the different properties when we start creating geometry. The next section here is shapes. So if we take this and drop it in, you'll see obviously the central part here is where we just kind of link everything up. Over here on the right is just a preview of what we are going to be getting from this particular shape. And so, so with this here, we can actually just start kind of connecting some of these, our X, Y, and Z. And when we do that, we can start changing the values down here by just kind of clicking on our globals. So we also have some other options here. You'll see that on this block, we can double click on it and go into the settings here. We can rename this to whatever we want. We want to obviously make sure that it's visible. If we just set this to false, it's just going to hide it. So we'll turn that on. You can go in and create your pen settings directly within the option right here. Let's turn this back on. Or in order to actually get those pens and surfaces to show up on the object settings, then you'll actually want to create some attribute parameters here, and we can do that just by dragging and dropping these directly in, and then you can just take these and link them up into the surfaces, and then from within here you can just rename this to whatever you want. Oh, this is the pen. We want to, in order to get this to show up under the objects, we need to turn that on as true, and then we can just call this a pen color and change it right here, or change it in the object. So we do the same thing for the surface. I always like just whatever I'm naming the node name, I just tend to copy and paste it into the parameter name, because the parameter name is what's going to show up in the object panel. And yeah, you can go in and just change the settings here. Notice that the 3D view here is very much simplified from the actual 3D view in Archicad. So it's not going to give us any sort of texture. It will take the surface color though and apply it there. So so that's something that's it kind of gives you a quick preview, but it's not going to give you any contour lines or anything like that. So, okay, let's go ahead and take this and let's just hit OK. And we'll just call this a cube test. And we'll take a look at how these are now showing up here in the library. So when we go to our object, just like when we create any new object, it's going to set it as the default. Just quick note here, it adds a new folder under the embedded library as PARAM-O. And so you can see here I have a few different versions. You can see that we have our pen color that's been added as a parameter, and our surface that's been added. And also just note that this is that 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter setting that has been already set up. So we can of course go in and modify these values after the fact, and then just simply, we can place it right on top of this table here, and there you can see that we now have this. These are still stretchy where we can move them in different directions, yeah, so that's kind of the basics of this. If we wanted to go in and continue editing, we would then just highlight it, go back to open selected PARAM-O object, and then we can continue working on this. So yeah, there's a lot of different settings here that we can go through and adjust. If we wanted to say like create some different length values and have the lengths set up in our object versus these globals, we could just take these, drop them in here, and then as soon as you override it like this, then it's going to just kind of transform that. We'd have to go in and set this to length X. Oop, can't type. Length X. Within here, we have different options for creating different step values. So right now, if our base value is just 1, the step value is going to be the increments between different values here. So I always like to just kind of crank that down so that you have a lot more variables in between. And so once you do this, then you can start changing this and going in and adjusting these directly within here if you'd like. So, okay, that's another way to control the sizing. So now that we've done that, that would create a new parameter for that. These are not really, these don't become parameters in the object settings because they're more global settings. So that's just something to kind of pay attention to. Okay, so there's a lot of other stuff here that we can play around with. I'm still learning what a lot of these different parts and pieces mean. So we'll definitely, as I start to learn more, I'll come back and do more or different tutorials as I really start understanding how all this goes together. But for the moment, I'd like to kind of back out of this, and I want to show you just real quickly. Oh, you can see how that has been updated. Let's just take a quick look at this there. So there you can see that we have this value, and of course we can go and just reset it. I think once you've added this length X in, then I don't think that this one does anything. I think we've kind of overridden it, but you'll notice, well, I thought that we were going to see it here where like the points become a little bit larger than the actual box. I guess it didn't do it in that case. So let's take a look here at this table that I've modeled in. I actually built this table directly from taking this image right here and just downloading it and trying to reverse engineer the image. You can actually see that I have it pulled up here. And so let's kind of walk through some of the settings there, and I'll kind of explain some of the thoughts that I've come to understand for how this is actually functioning. So with this selected, let's go into our libraries and objects. We'll open the selected PARAM-O object, and there we can see our table here. So you can see that there's quite a bit going on here, and let's just kind of walk through it, and we'll kind of explain a little bit of how this has been set up here. So okay, so to kind of start out at the top here over on this side, so we have our three kind of global object settings here, and these are going to be related down to these values over here. So if I change this to say from 2 to 3, you'll see our table getting longer. We adjust this, it's going to get wider. And as we're adjusting these, you'll notice that there's a lot of things that are already set up parametrically where like the number of decking on the top is changing. We can go through and make adjustments to like the legs and everything else. I'm going to just kind of reduce this down a little bit. We could change the height all from right here, and everything is set up nice and parametric. Oop, shoot, I hit enter there, and that exited us out. So something to kind of pay attention to. Don't hit enter when you're working with these. So yeah, we have kind of a lot going on here. You'll notice that, okay, we have our X, Y, and our Z. We have a leg thickness value here, which is actually plugging into a lot of different items here. How I'm understanding these subtractions, if we just take like one example here, like for say our legs. Let's see. So we have our leg thickness, and this is feeding into really a few different subtractions here. We have one that's feeding into the subtraction for moving the shape. So over on this side here, we actually have just our one base leg here, and then we also have moving of 3 additional legs that's kind of been offset. So with this subtraction here, we're actually taking this, subtracting our thickness from the overall dimension here, and then this subtraction is turning into an offset over on this side. So it's like we're taking the thickness of the leg and we're using that to kind of drive the offsets from the different sides, and that's working in 2 directions here. So we're subtracting it from our X direction and our Y direction, and so that's how we are coming into these moving of shapes over here. Yeah, what else on this? So we have our leg thickness. This is obviously kind of playing into our X and our Y dimensioning here, so we can go in and just, you know, click the little tabs here to adjust those. We also have, let's talk about the height here. So we have our height variable set up here. So again, we can change this. And with this height variable, we can see how this is flowing into two different subtractions here. We have one height that's flowing into a subtraction that comes into a move node for our top. So it's taking the height, it's subtracting our top. It's really kind of combining these two together into the subtraction, and then it's moving our top down essentially. So that's a little bit more of a complicated one to get to our top location here. But if we start adjusting our top thickness, you can see that it's adjusting up and down with our little toggle here. We have this addition here because this is actually playing into our height as well. So we're taking our deck thickness, which you can see, which is the decking on top. So we can adjust this, make this larger and smaller. And so this deck thickness is actually going into an addition here where we're taking our top thickness, which is this item, and our deck thickness. Those are both turning into our subtraction here. And then this is driving the height of our top, or the location of our top, is kind of how I'm understanding it here. So there's kind of a lot of interconnected little parts and pieces here going into this. Again, there's not a whole lot of information out there for how this all goes together. So I'm just trying to go through and reverse engineer this and understand how these are working at the same time. One little note here that I've found, which is kind of turned out to be really, really useful as I've been going through and trying to figure this out, is understanding the line work in between these different nodes. One thing that's kind of really useful here, like I'll take this block with this size Z as an example. It looks like there's almost two lines going into this size Z, but with these nodes here, it's really important that you understand the lines are coming straight out of the nodes. And so when trying to look at something like this that kind of starts looking like a bunch of spaghetti after a while, it's really useful to understand that, okay, there isn't anything going to this offset X node here because this line is coming at it at a very steep angle. So that's one thing that I found is really useful, like especially like this one right here. Like it looks like there's something going to the start, which would be coming over from this deck thickness, but because it's coming at it at an angle, we know that it's actually coming down here. So that's something to really just kind of pay attention to, is with the line work. So if you ever are trying to reverse engineer something like this, then it's just good to know that the lines from the nodes are coming straight out and then they start turning, and they're always very much symmetrical between the 2 points. So just wanted to point that out here because that's been really useful to understand as I've been going through this. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the decking width here, and there's kind of some interesting things going on with this. So with our deck width, we have this as a variable over here. You'll notice as I click this that we are getting quite a few different, we're essentially just changing the number of deck items that we have here, which is really cool. So if we want them nice and chunky and wide, then we can just set this up. One thing I haven't figured out yet is how to get this to distribute from this side to this side perfectly. You can figure it out, or you can try to get it really close just by adjusting the size and the gaps. But if anyone knows how to get that to be offset so that it distributes from one side to another, then let me know, because that's one I'm still trying to figure out here. But what's interesting with this is, well, let's not go to a negative. Let's kind of change these down. We'll go back and just plug this in at like 0.1. So with this, we have this expression here, which took me a little while to figure out what was actually going on in this expression. But what I've set up here is just like the expression editor in properties, you kind of need to look at the different inputs. So we have an input A, an input B, and an input C. So our input A in this case is our, it's essentially our width value or our Y value. And so that would be, just considered like, in this case, well, let's look at the ins and the outs. So our output from this is really a node here called number of distributions. So this value for the count, the input here, is going to be how many that we end up with in terms of the deck numbering here. So so with that, we need to set up a formula here that's going to take the width and then essentially divide it by the deck width that is a variable we set, and the gap that we set. So the logical formula here would just be taking the width and then dividing it by the deck width plus the gap, and that should return the number of items that we have to be distributed on the top here. So that's how I came up with it. I haven't really found that these values do much. I think that if you didn't have an input coming into the A, B, C, or D slots, then you could plug in your own value here and just kind of manually do it like that. But I have noticed that you need to have a $sign in here, or else these kind of get broken. But something I'm still trying to figure out as I go. So, okay, so with that, we have our overall width, which is our number, what's going to determine how many we have broken down. You can see again, as we adjust these, it's going to change the size on them here. And if you kind of play with it long enough, you can get it so that it's set right to that edge there. But something I still need to figure out is how to get that much more exact for the distribution there. So, okay, with that, there's all, certainly there's a few extra things that we could go in and do. In this particular case, I've actually just gone in and changed the material directly within here. So if we wanted to create a kind of a surface option, then we could just take this, drag, drop it right onto our surface there, and then use this one as a toggle for our deck surface. So lots of different options here for kind of building these up and yeah, just kind of making them work and function the way that you want. So obviously this is a very introductory tutorial on this. So as I get further into this, I'll be happy to do additional ones as I learn more, and hopefully there will be more documentation coming out walking through kind of the logic behind how a lot of this stuff gets set up and put together. So okay, with that, let's go ahead, we'll hit save on this. You'll notice that we did make a slight adjustment here. Our geometry didn't change because it's already a placed object, and we have kind of set our different sizes here. But as we go through, we can just make some quick adjustments, set our top. And when we're doing the inputs here, obviously this is in feet and inches, or it's going to be in whatever dimension settings or work environment settings that you have turned on. So okay, if you have any questions on this, then please just go ahead and leave it in the comment section. I'm not sure how much I'll actually be able to answer because, as I mentioned, I'm just kind of getting into this myself. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting way of building objects, and I know this is just their first version of it, so I expect that they'll be coming out with more documentation and tutorials on the subject. So yeah, hopefully this is enough to kind of get you started, and yeah, we'll catch you here on another video here soon. I'm going to be doing several more here on the new Archicad 24 features, but this is one that I wanted to jump into as soon as I saw it. And yeah, hopefully this has been helpful, and yeah, we'll catch you on another video. Thanks for watching.